options in Virginia are different, right? Because Virginia is a non-judicial state. Now, what does that mean exactly, Joe, when clients ask you that?
Well, non-judicial state, basically what happens when somebody's delinquent, they can't miss more than 3 payments. When you have someone that misses 3 payments, they usually get a letter from the bank saying, you're in jeopardy of foreclosure, don't miss any more payments. And of course, if you're going through a hardship, sometimes that's not possible to not miss any more payments. So basically what happens is, that's where we jump in and we negotiate the short sale in terms of making sure that the bank is, I don't know, do you want to answer some of this, Michelle, in terms of judicial state?
Yeah, let's just go through that. Michelle, you got to unmute yourself. There you go. Why don't you tell us about non-judicial state?
Okay. When I am sitting with a client at settlement and they're reviewing the settlement documents for the purchase, one of the documents that comes up is going to be the fact that this is a non-judicial state. There's a trustee. The trustee is assigned at the time of the settlement who will monitor the process of payments, et cetera, et cetera. If, in fact, there is a delinquency, then what will happen is the trustee is notified, and he then begins his process of perhaps doing a pre-foreclosure notification, something of that nature. And so when I am with my buyers, I tell them, you pay, you stay, you don't, you won't. But they don't have to go to court to take your home. They can simply render foreclosure by notices through the proper channels. And then you are in this pre-foreclosure situation is when we need to get Joe on board, or even earlier than that, to try to remedy and put a halt to pre-foreclosure proceedings. So some people think that they're going to get a court date, they're going to go in, they're going to explain their defense, this happened, that happened, so forth and so on. The banks are going to just let them stay. And that is not the case. So non-judicial means no court, and they follow a process through the trustee. I think that's really how it works, isn't it, Joe?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Michelle. And sometimes I have clients that just miss 4 payments in the foreclosure stops. I have clients that have not made a payment in 2 years, and they don't have a foreclosure. So there's no set timeline for when that foreclosure is going to stop. So you're always, on pins and needles, knowing that foreclosure could come anytime. That's why you really need to act on the short sale as soon as possible and let us contact the banks. Because a lot of times with the banks, if they know that you are trying to work with them, it will slow down on that foreclosure process. And we can, do our thing and make sure that we can get the short sale done and make sure that you can avoid foreclosure and at all costs.
So it really depends on the lender, right? The lender can send a notification after missing 2 payments maybe, or 3 payments, like you were saying. Or, if their system is kind of slow or, whatever is happening, like you were saying, sometimes it takes a little bit longer. And that's why we wanted to kind of talk about the different options, because we know that different people are going to be going through different scenarios. And some of you will want to figure out a way to see if you can stay in the home. Joe, why don't you talk about that? If somebody wanted to stay in their home, what are their options? How do you guys work with that?
Absolutely. A lot of clients call me, and they've been in their loan mod process for almost sometimes a year, because sometimes the banks will lead them on and say, oh, yeah, we'll do a loan mod, no problem. But really what they're doing is stalling so that they can foreclose on the house. One of the main things I get is clients saying, Joe, they've asked for my bank statement several times and, over and over again. And that's one of their stall tactics, is to ask for information over and over again so they can stall it. So when that foreclosure happens, they can just foreclose. I've even had banks promising, oh, we'll stop the foreclosure, no worries. And what happens is they go to foreclosure. So if you're trying to stay in your house, make sure you stay on top of the banks and make sure that you're calling them and there's different levels at the banks, and always try to talk to the corporate office, especially if you're doing a loan modification, because you'll get better answers. Because a lot of these people at loss mitigation, nothing towards them, but they're reading from scripts and they really don't know the whole process. Really make sure that you call someone that's high up. My information will be on this website. You can call me and I can give you some information on who to talk to. I've worked with every bank out there, and I can give you the high ups at your particular bank. I don't think there's a bank I haven't worked with right now. So,
yeah, I think that's a good point that you're making, because a lot of people probably don't understand the process that some of the banks, and we're not saying that every bank works the same way or every loan mod is the same, We're just saying some of the experiences that we're seeing out there, you know, you just really want to make sure that you're protected, because the loan mods, if they're taking months and months and you're not making payments, then by the time you figure out that it's not going to happen, you're already in foreclosure, is what Joe is saying, right, Joe?
Yes, absolutely.
And if they are late, or maybe they're not late with payments, but now something has happened, you know, maybe it's a divorce, or maybe it's a health issue, maybe they lost their job, maybe they're relocating, but they're not going to be able to make the payments now. So how do you approach something in that scenario?
If they're late right now?
If they're not late yet, but they know they're not going to be able to make payments. So what would be like one of the options, or some of the options that you could?
Yeah, there's a misconception in this in short sales that you have to be delinquent. When I started doing short sales in 2006, you had to be late. And what the banks were doing was they wouldn't start the short sale until you were 3 payments late. And guess what? What happens when you're 3 payments late? The foreclosure starts, excuse me. And they would foreclose on people. Well, there was a lot of complaints, and now they will actually do a short sale if you're current. It doesn't matter if you're not delinquent. You can actually do a short sale if you're current on your loan and you just can't sell the house. If your house is underwater, they will look at you. And even I've done short sales for people that were current that made over $200,000 a year. It doesn't matter. They will look at it. So don't have that misconception that you have to be delinquent, because you can do a short sale if you're current. And
sometimes you don't have to actually have a short sale per se, or we could. I guess I'm going to refer that to Michelle and Tim. If you guys know of a situation that's happening where you know the owner is becoming distressed, they're not late on their payments yet, but you do need to obviously engage Joe, and it may have to be a short sale. What are some of your strategies? What are the options that you give to your clients? Michelle, we'll start with you first. Can you unmute?
One of the important parts in a listing presentation is to evaluate the cash that a seller may have access to, what their mortgage balance is, what is the balance relative to the market value and all of the closing expenses, and what is their time frame. Now, Joe, you mentioned about the 3 months past due. That fallacy was out there because the mortgage insurance companies who were insuring those mortgages required that they be 3 months past due for them to pay off to the banks from the mortgage insurance. And so when they did that, of course, those mortgage insurance companies went bankrupt. After a while, you can't pay everybody off. But when I talk to a seller and he tells me I am not behind, but my prospects of staying in this home are not good, and I need to start thinking about what I can do, and where is my price point to avoid a short sale. And so that's where you go through the process of determining at this price, you're not a short sale. At this net price, you are.
And Tim, why don't you talk about what is the difference? Some people might not understand what a short sale is versus a regular sale. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure. I'd first just like to emphasize and reinforce what Michelle said. It really is kind of like a Texas two-step. One is understanding where the client is at today, be it a job loss, be it a divorce, some sort of financial situation, medical, personally, or someone in the family, something that is financially really stressing out the whole entire situation. And part of that is the house, but we understand there's other elements that come into play. So that intake that Michelle was talking about is key. It's very important to understand where each individual is at. This is not a cookie cutter approach. It is a Texas two-step, just 2 steps I'm talking about here, but each step there's a lot of details involved in it. So like Michelle was emphasizing, we need to get the details of where the potential client, our prospect that we hope to work with, and show them where they at. The key point where Michelle was saying financially on where you start to go underwater, the equity, where do we get equity out of the house? There's a real evaluation determination. It becomes a little personal. It's not easy, but when people start talking to us, I think they start to realize our expertise, our negotiation abilities, the experience that we've done. Michelle likes to say, education is power, knowledge is power. And that's what we like to, all of us like to give to the clients we work with. It's not something you can sum up real easily. But once we're able to have that discussion, be it a phone conference, a webinar, we encourage people to get online and take a look at the information after reviewing this webinar. And because there's a lot of information to take in, a lot of terminology, and it doesn't all make sense the first time, especially if there's a stress involved. So after that intake process, some of the things Joe has emphasized is every bank is different. And understanding that, again, this isn't cookie cutter. Is there one bank? Is there two banks? Joe and his team has worked with just about every national bank, regional bank, and a lot of local banks as well. And it just depends on the situation and how they go about saying they're going to help the mortgagee, the person with the loan. But each one is different. And we really lean on Joe's team to keep us up to date on what those financial institutions are doing. Because if it's completely different, even though Wells and Bank of America look like two big banks, they probably do the same thing. They don't. And Joe can tell you a lot of these stories of the different banks and the different managers and how files get handled just based on where somebody is in the timeline. So I think all this is just real important for people to understand. There's a lot of moving parts to this. We try to simplify it, but we try to understand all those moving parts. So you asked earlier what a short sale is, and a short sale really is when somebody sells their home short of the amount of money that is owed on the mortgage. And if Joe or Michelle want to chime in on another understanding of that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, what a short sale, in my opinion, is if you bought a house in the early 2000s, you bought it up here, okay? Well, the market's down here right now, and you're not able to sell the property for what you owe. And that's what a short sale is. The bank, takes what the house value is as a payoff. So right now, for example, I have a lot of clients that are in trial loan modifications with banks, and they were given, say, okay, 2006, they were given a 10-year trial loan modification, hoping the market would go back up. Well, guess what? The market didn't go back up, and they're not renewing these loan mods. So a lot of people are stuck, and the banks are saying you can either do a short sale or you can do a deed in lieu of foreclosure, which it's called a deed in lieu of foreclosure for a reason. It's because it's basically, in my opinion, a foreclosure, because it's not guaranteed that they're going to forgive that debt, and it's not guaranteed how they're going to report that to the credit bureau. So in terms of a short sale is an easy way to get out of the debt because you can't sell your home for what you owe because of the market.
Michelle, you're muted.
But also included in that is not just the mortgage balance. A lot of times sellers, my mortgage balance is only $200,000 and the value is $200,000, so I'm going to sell it and pay it off. No, the closing costs that the seller may owe, which include the mortgage balance, really can determine a shortfall in being able to sell the property. Joe and I, we have talked about, how we have to negotiate the commissions, how we have to negotiate the closing costs the seller offers to the buyer. Are there any sources of cash revenue that can come to the table, even if it's partial, in order to pay off that net? So it's really a net that is owed to sell the home, and what the lender now will negotiate and take on that cost to avoid having an empty property. Properties on the market for months and years. Properties on the market during the winter. So the banks have finally come around, the investors, to realize that they thought, okay, it's just going to be a piece of cake. We're going to get all these properties, we're going to foreclose, and then we're going to turn around and we're going to put them on the market to sell. And they suffered great losses because of the lack of maintenance in these properties once the sellers moved out. Is that not true, Joe?
That is absolutely true.
And I want to impress Joe. I just want to toot your horn a little bit here, because what Michelle was saying is that people don't realize that there are additional costs with selling a home, even with a short sale. But I know from your track record, you actually go beyond just the mortgage. If they owe, money on HOA and taxes. So why don't you just tell us a little bit more about that, because people might not realize and feel an extra burden because their financial situation has more than just a mortgage.
I was just going to say that. A lot of times when people come to me, they are not just delinquent on the mortgage, they're delinquent on a number of things. And one of those things is HOA. And we have a very good track record. Usually if you're very delinquent on the HOA, it's with an attorney's office. And we pretty much have worked with every attorney's office in this area that have HOA connections. Because the HOA, once it's a certain amount delinquent, just like a mortgage company, they get handed off to a lawyer to collect for. And we've been very successful. I mean, I'm working with a client right now that has a $15,000 debt to an HOA, and we were able to get it down to $2,000, and the bank paid it. And we've been very, very successful with that because if the house goes to foreclosure, guess what? HOA is not going to get paid. So the HOA is like, well, we'd rather get something than nothing, and we're able to work with them. So there's this misconception, that, I owe HOA, I owe, my car payments and all this. So you can still do a short sale if you have other debt. We can include that with the short sale, and the banks will pay it. And we've been very successful at that. And that's what separates our team from other teams, you would say, is that we, with our different connections at the banks, at the HOA companies, we're really passionate about what we do. And we really want to help people that are in distress.
And I think that's why I think you can stress the fact that that's why it's so important that clients really reveal all their distress to you, so that you have a full understanding of where they are or where they may be headed. Because I know, I know Tim and Michelle are both, actually I am as well, we're all divorce certified real estate specialists. And when it comes to divorce, you have two parties that don't want to have anything to do with each other sometimes, that don't want to talk to each other. Yet there's questions about the property, the property repairs and who's going to pay for certain things and how do you deal, all of that. So there's different stresses that's going to happen. Who's going to pay for the property taxes? Who's going to pay for the HOA? If the two parties aren't really talking and they want to pay $400 or $500 an hour for attorneys to discuss it amongst themselves, there's different distress situations and different ways that I know your team really comes through and really outlines once you get a full picture and understanding of it. And I just wanted to stress that again, it's really, really important that you disclose all of that to ensure that Joe and his team can go the extra mile to make sure that you have the least amount of impact financially. Now, we're going to talk about the impact of short sale and foreclosure, depending on how late you are along that timeline, because the further along you are on that, your options really narrow down. The earlier it is, right, Joe? The earlier it is, you have more options, and you can help them because you have more time, correct?
Absolutely. The more time, the earlier I get, for example, if you're not going to be able to make your payments, the earlier you contact us, the better, because we have more time. Not to say, sometimes you're in the middle of a loan modification, the loan modification keeps dragging and dragging and dragging. Please call us because we know all the tricks of the bank. I'm not saying tricks, but I'm saying, I know their stall tactics. And we will call them for free. It's just something I'm very passionate about. I'm helping people, and we're absolutely free. There's no hidden costs. We want to use our contacts to help you, and we want to utilize all of our years of experience and put that to use in helping you get out of your loan, or not get out of your loan, but help you either do a short sale or get some answers about your loan modification. Why am I having to send 3 bank statements every week when I've already sent them? We have those contacts that can answer those questions at the bank. I've been doing this since 2006. At every bank, there's someone at a certain level that can answer questions. You just got to get to that person. We can help you get there.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say, and it doesn't mean to sound disparaging, but somebody's home is personal. I mean, they have family memories and everything. I would love to see an industry average on the success of loan modifications. I personally think they sort of pull on the emotional strings of people. Oh, we'll help you stay in your home. And loan modifications, I would easily guess 80 or over 90% still end up going to a foreclosure or short sale process.
Right, absolutely.
In the loan modification process, my experience has been that in a short-term situation, they are not going to do an extended loan modification. If there does not seem to be light at the end of that, the short sale process is typically the most important. But one of the things that I would like sellers to know is, Joe, upon me contacting him, or I'm sure an individual, will do a title search. I have had short sales where there are IRS liens, there are real estate tax liens, HOA liens, mortgage liens, HELOC liens, lawsuits, and everything you can imagine. And you cannot begin to sell a process to a seller if you don't know where the starting line is.
Absolutely. And that's something you hit the nail right on the head. That's something we do when we have a client that comes to us. We run a full title report so we can see, because the title tells a story, how many liens they have, mortgages, if there's an IRS lien, And if there's an IRS lien, it's not the end of the world. We are very good, believe it or not, at getting the IRS to take nothing to release that lien. Actually, we've been very successful at that. There is a department at the IRS in Atlanta, Georgia, that we send a documentation. I think it's called an 8828 document that the client fills out and says, you have to prove that they're underwater. But if you prove that, they will release that lien for nothing to help you avoid foreclosure. So, because you have an IRS lien, please, move forward, because there is ways around that. I had a client last week, we just closed. He had I think it was a $200,000 IRS lien that we got released for nothing, so he could avoid foreclosure. Again, there's ways around everything. You just need to make that call and give us a call and see how we can help you.
And that's another thing that I want to talk about, is that there is no reason why you should be hesitating, because unlike a lot of the scam stuff out there, there's no cost to just getting the discussion with Joe, get the process started. And Joe, why don't you talk about the fact that, there's no cost upfront from the clients and some of the scams that are going out there. People are telling you that they're going to help you and you have to pay them upfront, etc. Is some of the things that we want to really touch up on.
Yeah, I get a lot of phone calls on a weekly basis from people that were with a previous office that paid them up front. There's no incentive. If you pay somebody up front, what's that incentive for them to work on your file? There's none. And what we do is we do it for free. We only get paid if it closes, and the banks pay us. They pay us through our settlement costs. Also the bank pays the real estate commissions. So nobody should be charging you up front for doing a short sale, in my opinion. That's kind of double dipping in my case, in my opinion. So basically what I get a lot is people calling me, Joe, I paid this office $3,500. I just called the bank. They don't have anything from the people I paid. What do I do? Well, we'll take over the file for free and make sure it gets done. And we've done that multiple times. I hate to say it. And we've also turned a lot of people in. I do have some connections at the state level. Nobody should be taking advantage of anybody going through a hardship. And it's something that's, again, very passionate to me, to help homeowners and get them the answers they need. And that's why I've never charged anybody anything to help them.
Yeah, and the nice thing about our team is we're all local. We're your neighbors, basically. Live in the area. You guys can meet us. It's not just somebody on the phone that's claiming to be able to help you.